Okay, it's class time. Thank you all for being here. My name is Verde Arbusto. This is the Schumann Resonance Harmonics channel on YouTube and on Facebook. This is part 3 of the article I'm reading, the Schumann resonance and their effect on the human bioregulatory system. All right, so this is an online article I'm reading, and I'm doing this hopefully as a public service to people who might otherwise want to read this article. It's kind of long, but you might not have the time. I'm going to read the article, and then I want to comment on it. I'm just sort of reading through it as one, I'm not making really many comments on it because I want to read through the article. Like I said, it's kind of long. That's why I've done this in 3 parts. So thank you all for being here to support me. And I'm going to, without further ado, if I haven't already, thank you all for being here. I appreciate your love and support and your comments, good, bad, or otherwise. So I'm going to pick up approximately where the other one had stopped. And so this is, again, going over tiny little bit of material, but it's all for the good because it can stand to be repeated. So onward and upward. NASA research on pulsating magnetic fields. NASA has had great interest in the Schumann resonances following the first space missions with astronauts. While several experiments were conducted on weightlessness, 39, others were conducted on electromagnetic fields and their effect on cell cultures. The EMF research and studies were outlined in a technical paper presented by Thomas G. Goodwin, Ph.D., of the Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center, entitled Physiological and Molecular Genetic Effects of Time-Varying Electromagnetic Fields on Human Neuron Cells. Dr. Goodwin noted that we found the low-amplitude, rapidly time-varying magnetic fields exerted a very potent effect on the proliferation, morphology, and gene expression of the cells in culture. 40. Essentially, the study's findings indicated that cells grow faster and stronger and live longer when exposed to low-frequency, pulsed electromagnetic fields like the Schumann resonances. NASA developed and used a pulse electromagnetic field generator to conduct their cell culture experiments. The generator was developed and used to generate the waveform of a strength of 1 to 6 milliamps AC square wave, 10 Hz variable duty cycle, which was pulse width modulated. They patented this generator, U.S. patent, 6,485,963, B1 and MSC 22633-4, notice to issue. Cultured cells were subjected to this 10 Hz frequency and extremely low-level magnetic fields, which are -10 to 200 milligauss, which are far less than the field strength of the Earth. One of the primary purposes of these studies was to develop a pulsed electromagnetic field device for use as a non-invasive countermeasure to enhance bone retention, prevent or alleviate muscle atrophy, and augment natural healing or regeneration processes for astronauts exposed to long durations in space. This research was a significant contribution toward enabling humans to live and work safely in space, and is especially relevant to projected human space exploration. On Earth, this device could be used in the treatment of various muscle diseases, age and cancer-related muscle atrophy, osteoporosis, and other bone diseases. Taken from this research, other manufacturers have now designed similar generators that produce pulsed ELFs at 7.83 Hz magnetic fields. These are being used by individuals to promote health and counterbalance potentially detrimental electrosmog. Okay, and then there is, in Latin here, I shouldn't even try and butcher this, but the translation is measure what is measurable and render measurable in time what as yet is not. This is Hallberg, Chronobiology Center, University of Minnesota. Becoming coherent with Schumann resonances. And we're getting close to the end of the article. Fortunately, there are a few things that can be done to improve a coherent relationship with the Schumann resonances. Incorporating these things into your life may help you gain the benefit of the positive effects of being in harmony with the Earth's ionospheric heartbeat. Okay? And these are some important things. Spend time in nature, such as the forest or a beach. The simple act of enjoying and being in nature acts like a tuning fork and training your vibration into coherence. Any nature spot will do. Walk in bare feet on the earth. Take a nap on the grass. Breathe fresh air. Gaze at the stars as often as possible. Listen to music that incorporates a Schumann frequency in the background during work or play. There are numerous commercial music CDs that incorporate the Schumann frequency as well as YouTube videos that are pleasant to watch. Invest in a Schumann resonator. Some researchers believe that by producing a 7.83 Hz signal with a field generator, Schumann device, we can reduce the irritating effects of man-made electromagnetic fields. By replicating the Earth's natural rhythm, we may be providing ourselves, at least in our immediate vicinity, with a healthier environment. There are several devices that emit a 7.83 frequency on the market available for purchase. I cannot recommend a particular device, but encourage anyone interested in a Schumann frequency generator to research any unit thoroughly before purchasing. Continually educate yourself about the wireless industry and man-made electromagnetic fields. Okay. Now, this handsome-looking fellow right here, if you didn't already know, he's the guy right there. Bam. Winifred Otto Schumann. He's in his teaching position right there, probably real close before he retired. And that is an actual picture of him, the dude. That's the guy, Mr. Schumann, right there. Winifred. W.O. Schumann. Okay, that's him. This is an action figure. He's moving. He's bouncing. He's still alive to us. Okay. Now he's Schumann. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Schumann. All right. So, this is what it says about the fella. Winifred Schumann biography. Winifred Otto Schumann was born May 20th, 1888. In Tübingen, sorry for butchering that, Germany, the son of a physical chemist. His early years were spent in Kassel and in Berndorf, a town near Vienna. He majored in electrical engineering at the Technical College in Karlsruhe. In 1912, he earned a doctorate with high-voltage technology as his thesis. Prior to the First World War, he managed the high-voltage laboratory at Braun, Boveri, and Sia. During the 1920s, He was made a professor at the Technical University in Stuttgart, where he had previously been employed as a research assistant. He subsequently took a position as professor of physics at the University of Jena. In 1924, he was made professor and director of the Electrophysical Laboratory at the Technical University of Munich. The Munich laboratory subsequently became the Electrophysical Institute, where Schumann continued working until retiring from active research in 1961 at the age of 73. He continued teaching for another 2 years. Schumann was 86 years old when he died on September 22, 1974. And by contrast, I was born in October 1968. So, that's making me feel old. I was, 6? I would have been 6, roughly 6, when he passed on. I could have met him. I could have met Schumann in my life. Anyway, all right, so. All right. So, that's what happens. I think he's moving over. All right. So, what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to read all these. I am going to go through them in such a way that, hold on. Hold, please. Okay. We're back. All right. So what I'm going to do here, I think this is fun. It's going to be fun for me. Is I'm going to play this. That's why I moved that so you can see it's as big as it can get. All right. And what I'm going to do is go through this slowly. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to play music, and I'm going to read it silently. So we're all going to quietly read this while we're listening to some music. All right. Okay, we are going to play this. I'm not sure. Oh, it's 1 hour. All right. I'm not going to play it for an hour, but we will watch. We'll watch a few minutes of it, I think.
In the mid-'80s, fewer than 3% of all people in most of our countries were using cell phones. But you fast forward to today, when almost 100% of people are using cell phones.
By the time they're 19 or 20 years old, they will have used the phone for 10 years, and we have no idea what type of risk that's carrying.
We've immersed ourselves in an ocean of electromagnetic radiation. It's all around us now. Invisible, we can't see it, but we know it's there. Every time you lift up your mobile phone, you know it's there.
It's very, very hard to turn the clock back, or if not impossible to turn the clock back. But we need to be aware of the adverse health effects so that we have the choice of taking precaution against the exposures.
At present, the World Health Organization statements regarding this are that it is real.
We were not the only cancer cluster around a foam mast. There are many cancer clusters around foam masts.
Most of the cancers which will arrive haven't arrived yet. How could we have possibly thought putting microwaves to our brain was safe?
We just don't fully understand yet what we're doing.
We have an announcement finally on whether cell phones cause cancer.
An unknown scientist is about to make a discovery that should have changed everything. His name was Winifred Otto Schumann. On the day in question, he was teaching his students about the physics of electricity, how a sphere within a sphere can create electrical tension, and subsequently, a frequency. Schumann's class had struggled to understand the subject, so to make it easier, the professor instructed them to imagine the Earth as one sphere and the ionosphere as another. He then asked them to calculate the tension that would exist in between. Having no idea himself, Schumann also began to calculate. Eventually, he arrived at a frequency of approximately 10 Hertz. As incredible as it seemed to Schumann, our planet had a pulse, a measurable frequency that surrounded life on Earth. Although the professor was proud of his find, he didn't see it as a hugely significant one, especially as it was only published in a small science journal, confined to the back pages, under the heading of Schumann resonance. It would take several years and an incredible twist of fate before the professor would begin to realize the true importance of Schumann resonance. That twist of fate had begun 30 years earlier with another German scientist by the name of Hans Berger. Using an EEG machine he had built himself, Berger had made the first ever recording of electrical frequency transmitted by the human brain. It was initially suggested the wave be named after the man who discovered it, but Berger, being a modest man, elected for an alphabetical name and called it the alpha wave. Shortly after Professor Schumann's discovery, one of Hans Berger's colleagues, a man named Dr. Ankermüller, happened to stumble upon a bedraggled copy of a small scientific journal. The exact same small scientific journal that Professor Schumann's discovery had been published in several years before. He read the piece several times, shaking his head in disbelief. He realized instantly the magnitude of what was in front of him. The frequency of the alpha waves, recorded by Hans Berger, were almost identical to Schumann resonance. The frequency of the Earth. Dr. Ankermüller immediately contacted Schumann to convince him to investigate further. Schumann agreed and worked alongside one of his students to refine his discovery. They studied in detail how tension is discharged by lightning in the Earth ionosphere cavity. Eventually, they came up with an exact frequency. The pulse of the Earth, Schumann resonance, was exactly 7.83 Hertz. The discovery was remarkable. Schumann resonance wasn't just similar to the alpha waves of the human brain, it was identical. The brain's frequency, which controlled our creativity, our performance, our stress, anxiety, and our immune system, had somehow tuned in to the frequency of the planet. The pulse of the Earth had become the pulse of life itself. The frequency of a wave is measured in hertz. This refers to the number of oscillations the wave makes each second. Frequencies range from a billionth the size of an atom to the length of the universe itself. In theory, frequencies are infinite, so ultimately endless. If this was a coincidence, it was nature's most spectacular. So what did all this mean? It wasn't long before somebody tried to find out. His name was Rutger Weaver, an acclaimed scientist from the Max Planck Institute. In the early 1960s, the professor constructed an underground bunker in order to examine the circadian rhythms of man. The circadian rhythm is the day-night cycle that is engraved into all life. Over a 30-year period, the professor conducted experiments in which student volunteers would spend several weeks at a time living in the bunker, completely shielded from the natural resonances of the Earth. In his results, Weaver noted some astonishing findings. He discovered that when Schumann resonance was filtered out of the bunker, the students' physical and mental health would suffer.
He took students down there. He didn't trust to do it with ill or old people. He took young students down there because he knew, Weaver knew that there would be an effect. So obviously underground you don't have Schumann resonance. You only have the transverse magnetic fields from in the Earth. So by putting them underground, they started feeling sick, having headaches. Their circadian rhythm was completely upset. The interesting thing was, when he just introduced the 7.8 Hertz frequency with a magnetic pulse generator, that immediately stopped.
Weaver would secretly introduce the 7.83 frequency to the bunker via a man-made transmitter. Each time he did so, he noted the ill effects suffered by the volunteers either disappeared or decreased. Their stress, headaches, and emotional distress was reduced, and their sense of well-being was restored. All by the introduction of Schumann resonance. Weaver's research had revealed an incredible connection between human health and the natural frequency of the planet. And in 2011, groundbreaking research suggested something even more impressive, that Schumann resonance could be connected to the beginnings of life itself. The breakthrough came at the hands of Luc Montagnier, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist who first discovered the HIV virus. The professor was conducting water memory experiments, examining how water could retain a memory of substances that had previously been dissolved in it, when he stumbled upon something that would challenge the very principles of science. All life comes from life. This is a fundamental principle of science, and one which has never been violated in any experiment. Life can only exist where life has existed before. And the mechanism for this has always been understood to be a material one, such as egg and sperm, or spore and cell division. But Luc Montagnier's experiments have offered a very different hypothesis. The professor showed that DNA sequences, the very building blocks of life, communicate with each other in water by emitting low-frequency electromagnetic waves. Even when the DNA was kept in separate test tubes, the professor still recorded electromagnetic communication between them. How sophisticated could this communication be? Well, Luc Montagnier showed they are able to organize nucleotides, the ingredients which actually make up DNA, into brand new DNA. Science has combined these ingredients countless times before, but in no experiment have they ever been able to recreate the spark of life and transform nucleotides into actual DNA, not without DNA already being present. Life, after all, can only exist where life has existed before. But in Luc Montagnier's experiments, the DNA had been completely filtered from the water. Yet new DNA was still formed. Just how was this possible? How had Luc Montagnier managed to achieve what no other scientist could, and create life where no life was present? What was so different about Luc Montagnier's experiments? There was the presence of a frequency which, when removed, would cause the experiments to fail, but when present, would ensure that they would succeed. That frequency was 7.83 Hertz, Schumann resonance. A delicate relationship had been struck between life and the frequency of the planet, an interaction of living organisms and electromagnetic frequencies, a reliance, a bond. Evidence of this can be found by reading the science papers, but more obvious proof can be found by simply walking outside. How did all this happen? Well, when you look at the history of the Earth, it seems pretty obvious. Schumann waves have been part of this planet since the very beginning. Life evolved surrounded by them, and inevitably tuned in. In fact, our sensitivity to frequency became deeply connected to our ability to sense another of the planet's phenomena. Two billion years ago, magnotatic bacteria formed a simple but intriguing relationship with the Earth's magnetic fields. The single-celled organism contained particles of magnetic material. This enabled it to act like the needle of a compass and orient along the magnetic lines of the Earth. As organisms became more complex, so did their reliance on the Earth's magnetic fields.
do know that bees are sensitive to magnetic fields. We know that within their bodies they contain particles of magnetite, and laboratory studies have shown that they are indeed sensitive to magnetic fields, and you can demonstrate in laboratory that if you artificially create a magnetic field, you can control the way that they build their comb, and it seems logical that bees are using magnetic fields in navigation.
The delicate balance of life on Earth is perfectly illustrated by reliance on bees and their pollination of plants. It's hypothesized that without bees, life wouldn't stand much of a chance.
Insect pollination is needed for really all the things that make eating interesting. So all the fruits, the nuts, and things like that all require insect pollination, and bees are the most important group of pollinators.
If the bees weren't here,
If the bees,
we'd have a very boring diet.
yes, we would have a very thin existence. I think that's the point without bees. And of course, as well as the...
All right, the video is going to end soon, and I think that this is probably a good introduction for you to watch the video yourself. Thank you all for being here. Share this, like,